The concrete beneath Maya Chen's boots had developed hairline cracks over the past 3 months. What started as barely visible lines had grown into spider webs of damage that maintenance insisted were normal settling. Maya knew better. The cracks followed a pattern that matched her footsteps during her daily rounds through the North Point research facility. Maya had worked as head of security for North Point for 7 years, but the last 6 months had tested every ounce of patience she possessed. The facility housed classified research projects that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, but recent changes in management had turned her dream job into a nightmare of bureaucratic incompetence and dangerous shortcuts. Dr. Harrison Pierce, the new facility director, had arrived with cost-cutting mandates that made Maya's blood pressure spike. Security protocols that took years to develop were being dismantled in favor of automated systems that failed more often than they worked. Safety measures were labeled as excessive precautions by accountants who had never spent a day in an actual research environment. The morning everything changed started like any other. Maya arrived at 5:30, an hour before her shift officially began. She preferred the quiet time to review overnight reports and prepare for whatever chaos the day might bring. The security office felt different that morning, though she couldn't immediately identify why. Her assistant, Marcus Rodriguez, was already at his desk reviewing camera feeds. Marcus had been with the company for 3 years and shared Maya's dedication to proper security protocols. His young face carried worry lines that had deepened since Pierce's arrival. "Anything unusual overnight?" Maya asked, settling into her chair with her usual black coffee. Marcus hesitated. "Define unusual." "We had another system glitch in Section C around midnight. Cameras went dark for exactly 11 minutes and 43 seconds. Maya's jaw tightened. Section C housed the most sensitive research projects, including the classified work that Dr. Sarah Wild's team conducted behind triple-locked doors. The fact that security cameras were experiencing regular failures in that specific area was not coincidence. "Fifth time this month," Maya muttered, pulling up the incident logs on her computer. "Did maintenance respond?" "They said they'd look into it today." Same response as the last 4 times. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every security concern Maya raised was met with delays, excuses, or outright dismissal. Pierce had made it clear that he considered the security department an expensive necessity rather than a crucial component of facility operations. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Pierce, budget meeting at 8 a.m. Bring security spending proposals. She had submitted 3 different versions of security spending proposals over the past 2 months. Each version cut deeper into essential services while maintaining the bare minimum safety standards. Pierce had rejected all 3 as still too expensive. The budget meeting took place in Conference Room A, a sterile space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the facility's main research wing. Pierce sat at the head of the polished table, flanked by 2 accountants whose names Maya had never bothered to learn. They treated human safety like line items on a spreadsheet. "Maya, I need you to understand our position," Pierce began without preamble. "Corporate has mandated a 25% reduction in operational costs across all departments. Security represents 18% of our current budget." Maya kept her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. "Dr. Pierce, security isn't optional. We're protecting research worth hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the safety of 300 employees. Which is exactly why we're implementing the new automated monitoring system. It will reduce staffing needs while improving coverage." The automated system Pierce referenced was a bargain basement solution that had already failed multiple stress tests. Maya had documented every failure, but her reports seemed to disappear into administrative black holes. "The automated system has a 47% failure rate during our testing phase," Maya said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "I've documented every malfunction, including the 12 instances where it failed to detect actual security breaches during simulation tests." One of the accountants flipped through the folder dismissively. "These tests were conducted under unrealistic conditions. The manufacturer assures us that real-world performance will be significantly better." Maya felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold determination that she hadn't experienced since her military days. Are you suggesting that I falsified security test results? Pierce raised his hand in a placating gesture. Nobody's questioning your integrity, Maya. We simply need to move forward with solutions that fit our budget constraints. And, when someone gets hurt because our security failed? That's a risk assessment we're prepared to make. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya understood that Pierce wasn't just cutting costs, he was systematically dismantling every protection she had built to keep people safe. Worse, he was doing it with the arrogant assumption that she would simply accept his decisions without resistance. Maya stood slowly, her chair sliding back with a soft scraping sound. She had spent 7 years building relationships with every department in the facility. Researchers trusted her judgment. Maintenance crews respected her expertise. Even the cleaning staff knew they could count on her to address their safety concerns. I'll need your final decision in writing, Maya said quietly. Pierce's smile was condescending. Of course. We'll have the implementation timeline ready by tomorrow morning. As Maya left the conference room, she felt the floor beneath her feet differently. The concrete seemed less solid, as if the very foundation of the building was responding to the tension she carried. It was a ridiculous thought, but the sensation persisted as she walked back to the security office. Marcus looked up as she entered. How bad was it? They're moving forward with the automated system. Full implementation starting Monday. That's insane. Half our current security measures will be obsolete. Maya nodded, but her attention was drawn to something else. The small crack in the concrete floor near her desk had grown longer since morning. Not by much, but enough to be noticeable. She knelt down to examine it more closely. The crack ran in a perfectly straight line from her chair to the door. The edges were sharp and clean, as if the concrete had simply decided to separate along that exact path. Maya had seen plenty of structural damage during her military service, but this didn't match any normal settling pattern. Her phone rang, interrupting her examination. The caller ID showed Dr. Wilde's extension from Section C. Maya, we need you down here immediately. Dr. Wilde's voice carried an urgency that made Maya's pulse quicken. Something's happened to the containment protocols. Maya was already moving toward the door. What kind of something? The kind that requires your expertise before we have a real problem. The walk to Section C took Maya through the facility's main corridor, past laboratories where researchers bent over microscopes and computer screens. Everything looked normal, but Maya noticed that several people glanced up as she passed. Their expressions carried a tension that hadn't been there earlier. Dr. Wilde met Maya at the Section C entrance, her usually composed demeanor showing cracks of strain. Sarah Wilde was brilliant, methodical, and not prone to panic. If she was worried, the situation was serious. The containment field generators are showing anomalous readings, Dr. Wilde explained as they walked toward her laboratory. Energy fluctuations that don't match any known variables in our research parameters. Maya followed Dr. Wilde into a laboratory that hummed with sophisticated equipment. Banks of monitors displayed data streams that meant nothing to Maya but clearly troubled the scientist. In the center of the room, a cylindrical chamber contained something that made Maya's skin crawl. The object inside the containment field looked like liquid shadow given form. It moved without following any recognizable physics, flowing upward one moment and pooling into geometric shapes the next. Maya had clearance to know that Dr. Wilde's team was studying materials recovered from an undisclosed source, but she had never seen the actual specimens. How long has it been doing that? Maya asked, gesturing toward the writhing mass. The unusual behavior started about an hour ago. Right around the time you had your meeting with Pierce. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the laboratory's air conditioning. That's probably coincidence. Dr. Wilde's expression suggested she wasn't convinced. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you been experiencing anything unusual lately? Physical sensations, changes in your environment, anything that might seem connected to stress or strong emotions? The question caught Maya off guard. Why would you ask that? Because the energy reading spiked exactly when you entered the building this morning.
They spiked again during your meeting. And they're spiking right now. Maya looked at the monitors displaying data she couldn't interpret. The numbers were climbing steadily, and alarm indicators were beginning to flash yellow. You're suggesting that I'm somehow affecting your research? I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm gathering data.
But, Maya, if there's a connection between your emotional state and these readings, we need to understand it before something dangerous happens.
Before Maya could respond, the lights in the laboratory flickered.
Not the brief flicker of a power fluctuation, but a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to follow the beating of her heart. The containment field around the shadow creature wavered, and, for just a moment, Maya could swear she felt something reach toward her consciousness.
Dr. Wild's fingers flew over her control panel, stabilizing the containment field. Maya, I think you should step outside for a moment.
As Maya moved toward the door, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze.
It was soft, almost inaudible, but unmistakably organic.
Something between a growl and a whisper, coming from the direction of the contained specimen. The concrete floor beneath her feet developed another crack as she walked. This one followed her exact path from the laboratory door to the corridor, as if her footsteps were leaving permanent marks in the building's foundation. Maya's phone buzzed with another message from Pierce. Security implementation meeting moved to this afternoon.
Your cooperation is expected.
Standing in the corridor outside Dr. Wild's laboratory, Maya realized that her patience wasn't just being tested. Something fundamental was changing, both within her and within the facility itself. The cracks in the floor were spreading, the research was showing anomalous readings, and Pierce's administrative pressure was pushing toward a breaking point that might have consequences no one was prepared for. The day was still young, but Maya could feel something building like pressure in a sealed container. Whatever was happening at North Point Research Facility, it was bigger than budget cuts and security protocols. And Maya was somehow at the center of it all. The afternoon security meeting took place in the same conference room where Maya's patients had first cracked that morning. Pierce had brought reinforcements, 2 men in expensive suits who introduced themselves as efficiency consultants from corporate headquarters. Their handshakes were firm but cold, and their eyes held the calculating look of people who measured human value in dollars and cents. Maya arrived 5 minutes early, carrying a leather portfolio containing 7 years of security documentation. Every incident report, every safety improvement, every successful threat mitigation was organized in chronological order.
If Pierce wanted to dismantle her department, she would make him explain why each protection was unnecessary.
The consultants had spread laptops and tablets across the conference table, their screens displaying charts and graphs that reduced North Point's security needs to colorful pie charts. Maya recognized the data points but noticed they had omitted crucial context that made the numbers meaningless. Maya, please sit down, Pierce said without looking up from his tablet.
We've prepared a comprehensive transition plan that will streamline security operations while reducing operational costs by 32%.
One of the consultants, a thin man with prematurely gray hair, began reading from his tablet.
Current security staffing consists of 8 full-time positions across 3 shifts.
Post-implementation staffing will consist of 3 positions monitoring automated systems during business hours only.
Maya kept her voice steady. What happens during nights and weekends? Automated systems will maintain full coverage. Human intervention will only be required if the system detects anomalies requiring investigation. And if the automated system fails, like it has during every test we've conducted?
Pierce finally looked at her directly.
Maya, your resistance to progress is becoming counterproductive.
The decision has been made at levels far above both of us.
Something cold and sharp crystallized in Maya's chest.
She had spent her military career following orders, even when those orders were questionable.
But this wasn't about following orders anymore. This was about deliberately creating dangerous conditions to save money. Dr. Pierce, I need you to understand something. Security isn't a luxury service that you can cut when budgets get tight.
It's the foundation that allows everything else to function safely. When that foundation cracks, everything built on top of it collapses. As she spoke, Maya heard a sound that made her pause. It was subtle, almost below the threshold of normal hearing, but it seemed to come from the building itself. A low rumble, like distant thunder, that she felt more than heard. The second consultant, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, leaned forward.
Ms. Chen, we understand your concerns, but our analysis shows that current security spending exceeds industry standards by 43%. Northpoint is paying for protection against threats that statistical analysis suggests are extremely unlikely.
Maya opened her portfolio and pulled out a thick folder marked Incident Reports Classified. She placed it on the table with deliberate care. This contains documentation of 17 security breaches over the past 2 years that your statistical analysis missed. Breaches that would have resulted in stolen research, industrial espionage, or physical harm to personnel if my team hadn't detected and prevented them.
Pierce reached for the folder, but Maya kept her hand on it.
These incidents aren't included in the data you're using to make your decision because they were prevented before they became public knowledge.
Successful security is invisible security.
The rumbling sound grew slightly louder, and Maya noticed that both consultants glanced toward the windows as if trying to identify its source. Pierce seemed oblivious, his attention focused entirely on the budget numbers on his screen.
Maya, I appreciate your dedication, but the decision is final. Implementation begins Monday morning. You can either help manage the transition or we'll manage it without you. The threat was clear and unambiguous. Maya had seen this pattern before during her military service.
When administrative pressure reached a certain threshold, people started viewing human resources as expendable obstacles rather than valuable assets.
Maya stood slowly, leaving the incident report folder on the table. I'll need the weekend to prepare transition documents for my replacement.
Pierce's smile was triumphant.
Excellent. I knew you'd see reason.
As Maya walked toward the door, she felt the rumbling sensation travel through the floor beneath her feet.
The concrete seemed to respond to her movement, as if her footsteps were creating resonance patterns in the building's foundation.
She paused at the threshold and looked back at Pierce. Dr. Pierce, one more thing. When the security system fails and people get hurt, remember that you had access to all the information you needed to prevent it. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow echoed longer than it should have. Maya returned to the security office to find Marcus and the rest of her team gathered around the main monitoring station. Their faces carried expressions of confusion and concern that immediately put Maya on alert.
What's happening? She asked. Marcus turned from the bank of monitors. We're getting readings that don't make sense. Seismic sensors throughout the facility are detecting microvibrations, but there's no external source. No construction, no heavy machinery, no geological activity. Maya looked at the seismic data scrolling across multiple screens. The vibration patterns showed regular pulses that seemed to originate from within the building itself. More troubling, the pulses were growing stronger and more frequent. When did this start? Maya asked. About 20 minutes ago. Right around the time you went into your meeting.
Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, but the alternative explanations were too strange to consider seriously. Her phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Wilde.
Maya, I need you back in Section C immediately.
The containment readings are off the charts. As Maya hurried through the facility's corridors, she noticed that other people had begun to sense something unusual.
Researchers emerged from their laboratories looking puzzled. Maintenance workers stopped their activities to listen for sounds they couldn't quite identify.
Even the usually oblivious administrative staff seemed aware that something was different.
Dr. Wilde met Maya at the Section C entrance with an expression of barely controlled alarm.
The containment field has been fluctuating for the past hour.
Every time the readings spike, the specimen becomes more active.
They entered the laboratory to find Dr. Wilde's research team gathered around monitoring stations, their voices carrying urgent technical discussions that Maya couldn't follow. The containment chamber in the center of the room hummed with increased energy, and the shadow creature inside moved with what looked like deliberate purpose. Maya, I need to show you something, Dr. Wilde said, leading her to a workstation displaying complex waveform patterns. These are the seismic readings from the facility's foundation sensors.
Notice anything familiar?
Maya studied the patterns, recognizing a rhythm that made her stomach clench. They match my walking pattern.
Not just your walking pattern.
They match your heartbeat, your breathing, even the micro movements you make when you're concentrating.
It's as if the building is responding to your biological rhythms.
The possibility was so far outside Maya's understanding of normal physics that she almost laughed.
That's impossible. Dr. Wilde pulled up another screen showing energy readings from the containment field.
Impossible things have become routine around here lately.
Maya, I think the specimen is reacting to you specifically.
Not to human presence in general, but to something unique about your bioelectric signature. As if responding to their conversation, the shadow creature in the containment chamber shifted into a more defined shape. For just a moment, it looked almost like a wolf standing on its hind legs, its form made of liquid darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Maya felt something stirred deep in her chest. Not fear exactly, but a recognition that she couldn't explain.
Dr. Wilde, what exactly are you studying down here? Materials recovered from a research site in northern Alaska.
The original team described them as biologics of unknown origin before they lost contact with their base camp.
Lost contact how? Dr. Wilde's expression grew grim. The entire team disappeared.
When the rescue operation reached their camp, they found equipment intact but no human remains. Just these specimens and some very disturbing research notes about symbiotic consciousness transfer. The containment chamber began emitting a sound that Maya felt in her bones. It wasn't quite a growl, wasn't quite a whisper, but something that seemed to communicate meaning without using actual words. Maya found herself taking a step closer to the chamber. Maya, don't move any closer, Dr. Wilde warned.
The containment field is designed to prevent any kind of interaction between the specimen and external consciousness. But Maya was already moving.
Something was drawing her toward the chamber with a compulsion that felt both foreign and familiar. As she approached, the shadow creature inside began to change, its formless darkness taking on more defined characteristics. The change wasn't random. The creature was becoming more wolf-like, but not like any wolf that existed in nature. This was something larger, more intelligent, and infinitely more dangerous. Its eyes, when they formed, were not the yellow or brown of natural wolves, but a deep silver that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. Maya reached out toward the containment field, her hand stopping just inches from the energy barrier. The moment her fingers came close to the field, every light in the laboratory flickered, and the floor beneath her feet developed a crack that ran from the chamber to the door in a perfectly straight line. The wolf creature inside the chamber looked directly at her, and Maya heard something impossible. Not with her ears, but with some deeper part of her consciousness that she hadn't known existed. It was communication without words, understanding without explanation. The message was simple but profound: they tested our patience. Now we show them what patience can become. Dr. Wilde grabbed Maya's shoulder, pulling her back from the containment field.
Maya, what just happened? Maya looked at her hand, which was trembling slightly.
She could still feel the connection to the creature, like a thread of awareness that stretched across impossible distances.
I think I understand what happened to the research team in Alaska.
The laboratory's emergency alarms began blaring, and red lights flashed throughout Section C. The containment field was losing stability, and the shadow creature was pressing against the energy barrier with increasing force.
Everyone out!
Dr. Wilde shouted to her team.
Emergency containment protocols now!
As the research team evacuated the laboratory, Maya stood frozen in place. She could feel the creature's consciousness touching the edges of her mind, not invasively but with a patient curiosity that felt oddly familiar. It wasn't trying to control her thoughts, but to understand the connection they seemed to share. Marcus's voice crackled through her radio. Maya, we're getting system failures throughout the building. Something's interfering with every electronic system simultaneously.
Maya looked around the laboratory one more time.
The creature in the containment chamber had returned to its original formless state, but she could still feel its awareness watching her.
Whatever was happening at Northpoint wasn't just about budget cuts and security protocols anymore.
As she left Section C, Maya realized that her patience hadn't just been tested. It had been measured, evaluated, and found worthy of something she didn't yet understand. But she was about to find out exactly what that something was. The cracks in the floor followed her footsteps all the way back to the security office. Friday evening brought an emergency all-hands meeting that Pierce called without explanation. Maya arrived at the main auditorium to find 300 worried employees packed into seats designed for 200. The air hummed with nervous conversations about system failures, strange sounds, and cracks appearing in walls throughout the facility. Pierce stood at the podium wearing the forced smile of a man trying to control a situation he didn't understand. Behind him, a presentation screen displayed corporate logos and budget charts that seemed wildly inappropriate given the circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, I've called this meeting to address some concerns about recent facility maintenance issues, Pierce began, his voice echoing through speakers that occasionally crackled with static interference. Maya sat in the back row, watching Pierce attempt to minimize problems that were growing worse by the hour. Since her encounter in Section C, the building's structural anomalies had accelerated beyond anything that could be explained by normal settling or foundation shifts.
Dr. Wilde entered the auditorium and spotted Maya immediately.
She made her way to the back row, her expression carrying urgency that made Maya's pulse quicken. "We need to talk," Dr. Wilde whispered. "The containment situation has changed."
Pierce continued his presentation, showing charts that portrayed facility issues as minor maintenance concerns requiring routine attention.
He made no mention of the seismic readings, the electronic system failures, or the fact that structural engineers had been called in twice that afternoon. "Dr. Pierce," a voice called from the middle of the auditorium.
It was Dr.
James Harrison, one of the senior researchers whose work Maya had helped protect on multiple occasions.
"What about the power fluctuations?"
"My laboratory lost data from 3 weeks of research when our backup systems failed simultaneously."
Pierce's smile tightened. "Isolated incidents, Dr. Harrison. Our facilities team is implementing solutions that will prevent future occurrences."
Maya felt something build in her chest. Not anger this time, but something deeper and more focused. Pierce was lying to people who trusted him to keep them safe, minimizing dangers that could have serious consequences for everyone in the building.
"What about the structural damage?" another researcher called out.
"There are cracks appearing in walls and floors throughout the facility."
"Normal settling that requires routine monitoring," Pierce replied smoothly.
"Nothing that poses any safety risk to personnel or research operations." Dr. Wilde leaned closer to Maya.
"The specimen broke containment 20 minutes ago." Maya's blood turned cold. "What do you mean broke containment?"
"The containment field collapsed, but the specimen didn't try to escape the chamber.
It's just sitting there, waiting for something." "Maya, I think it's waiting for you." Before Maya could respond, Pierce made an announcement that sent shock waves through the auditorium. "Additionally, I'm pleased to announce that starting Monday, Northpoint will be implementing a new automated security system that will improve safety while reducing operational costs."
The auditorium erupted in concerned voices. Researchers who had worked with Maya's team for years understood exactly what automated security meant for their project's protection.
They knew that machines couldn't replace human judgment when dealing with complex threats.
Maya stood slowly, her movement causing conversations around her to quiet. Something about her posture, her expression, or maybe just the timing of her action drew attention from throughout the auditorium. "Dr. Pierce," Maya's voice carried clearly through the sound system, though she wasn't near a microphone. "You're telling 300 people that their safety and their work will be protected by systems that have failed every reliability test we've conducted." Pierce's composure cracked slightly.
"Ms. Chen, this isn't the appropriate forum for departmental concerns. Actually, this is exactly the appropriate forum. These people deserve to know that you're removing security protections to meet budget targets set by people who have never worked in a research environment." The energy in the room shifted palpably. Maya could feel the attention of everyone present focused on the confrontation developing between her and Pierce.
More importantly, she could feel something responding to that energy from deep within the building itself. Pierce's voice took on a sharper edge.
Miss Chen, I think you should return to your office. No.
The word came out with more force than Maya had intended. It echoed through the auditorium with unusual resonance, and she felt the floor beneath her feet respond with a subtle vibration that spread outward like ripples in still water. Dr. Wilde grabbed her arm.
Maya, the specimen is responding to your emotional state.
If you don't calm down, we could have a real crisis. But Maya was past the point of calming down. 7 years of building trust, creating safety protocols, and protecting people were being dismissed by a bureaucrat who measured human lives in quarterly profit margins. Dr. Pierce, let me explain something to you and everyone else in this room.
Security isn't optional. It's not a luxury that you can eliminate when budgets get tight.
It's the foundation that allows brilliant people to do important work without worrying about threats they shouldn't have to handle themselves.
As Maya spoke, the lights in the auditorium began to flicker in rhythm with her words.
The effect was subtle at first, but became more pronounced as her voice grew stronger. For 7 years, my team has prevented incidents that would have cost millions of dollars and, possibly, lives. We've stopped industrial espionage, prevented equipment theft, detected safety hazards before they became emergencies, and maintained the secure environment that allows cutting-edge research to happen safely. Pierce tried to interrupt, but Maya continued, her voice carrying an authority that filled the auditorium.
The automated system that Dr.
Pierce wants to implement has a failure rate that would be criminal negligence in any other industry.
It cannot distinguish between actual threats and false alarms. It cannot make judgment calls when situations don't match programmed parameters. It cannot adapt when intelligent threats develop countermeasures.
The building's structural response to Maya's words was becoming impossible to ignore. Windows rattled slightly, and several people looked around nervously as they felt vibrations through their seats. Dr. Wilde's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. Dr. Wilde, please respond. The specimen has become active again, and we're detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout Section C.
Maya heard the transmission and felt something click into place in her understanding.
The creature wasn't just responding to her emotional state. It was somehow connected to her, sharing her experiences and amplifying her responses to external pressures. She looked directly at Pierce, and, when she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from the building itself. Dr. Pierce, you have tested my patience and found it insufficient for your purposes. You have decided that safety is negotiable and that experience is expendable. You have chosen to value profit margins over human lives. The light stopped flickering and blazed with unusual intensity. The structural vibrations focused into a steady rhythm that everyone in the auditorium could feel through their feet.
But patience has limits, Dr. Pierce.
And, when those limits are reached, other qualities emerge to take its place. Maya felt the connection to the creature in Section C strengthen, not as an intrusion into her consciousness but as a recognition of shared purpose. The wolf-like entity wasn't trying to control her. It was offering partnership with something that understood the responsibility of protection. Pierce's face had gone pale, and his hands shook as he gripped the podium.
Miss Chen, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building.
Maya smiled, and the expression contained something that made Pierce step backward involuntarily. Dr. Pierce, you seem to have forgotten something important.
I am security.
The moment Maya spoke those words, every electronic system in the auditorium failed simultaneously. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in red illumination that made shadows seem deeper and more active.
In the dim emergency lighting, Maya's silhouette seemed to change subtly.
Her posture remained human, but something about her presence suggested capabilities that extended beyond normal physical limitations. Dr. Wilde's radio squawked with panicked transmissions, complete containment failure in Section C.
The specimen has left its chamber and is moving through the facility. All personnel evacuate immediately. But Maya knew the creature wasn't randomly moving through the facility.
It was coming to join her, drawn by the same protective instincts that had driven her to challenge Pierce's dangerous policies. The auditorium erupted in concerned voices as people tried to understand what was happening. Some headed for exits, while others looked to Maya for guidance they had learned to trust over 7 years of competent leadership. Pierce grabbed a security radio and shouted into it, "All available security personnel to the auditorium immediately.
Arrest Ms.
Chen for insubordination and facility interference." The radio crackled with static, then Marcus's voice came through clearly, "Sir, we're not going to arrest Maya. She's the only one keeping this place from complete chaos."
Maya walked toward the front of the auditorium, and the crowd parted naturally to create a path for her.
The emergency lighting seemed to follow her movement, casting her shadow across the walls in ways that suggested she was not alone. Pierce backed away from the podium as Maya approached.
"You're making a serious mistake, Ms. Chen. Corporate will have you arrested for what you're doing."
Maya reached the podium and looked out at 300 faces that reflected trust, concern, and growing understanding that the situation at North Point had moved far beyond normal administrative conflicts. "Dr. Pierce is right about one thing," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium despite the failed sound system.
"I am making a choice.
The choice to prioritize safety over profit, experience over automation, and responsibility over convenience." The doors at the back of the auditorium opened with a sound like distant thunder. Through the emergency lighting, a shape moved that was definitely not human but carried itself with unmistakable intelligence and purpose. The wolf creature from Section C entered the auditorium, its form more solid and defined than it had appeared in containment. It moved with fluid grace, its silver eyes scanning the crowd with protective assessment rather than predatory interest. Pierce stumbled backward, his face reflecting terror as he realized that the facility's most dangerous research specimen was loose and seemingly cooperating with his terminated security chief. Maya felt the creature's presence like a completion of something that had been missing from her consciousness. Not control or possession, but partnership with an entity that understood the true meaning of protection. "People of North Point," Maya said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from the building itself, "your safety has always been my responsibility.
That responsibility doesn't end because someone signed a termination letter." The wolf creature moved to stand beside Maya, its presence transforming the entire dynamic in the auditorium. This wasn't a scene of workplace conflict anymore.
This was something far more primal and powerful. Pierce made one last attempt to regain control. "Someone call the police. Call the military. This woman has released a dangerous experimental subject."
Maya looked at him with something that might have been pity.
"Dr. Pierce, you still don't understand what's happening here.
We weren't the ones being experimented on."
The wolf creature's eyes met Pierce's, and in that gaze was an intelligence that had been watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to act. Pierce's face went white as he realized the full implications of what Maya had just said. The testing of patience was over. Now came the response. The wolf creature's presence in the auditorium created a silence that felt heavy with potential energy. 300 people sat perfectly still, not from fear but from an instinctive understanding that they were witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of what was possible. Maya felt the creature's consciousness merge more completely with her own, bringing with it memories that weren't hers but somehow felt familiar. Images of the research team in Alaska, brilliant scientists who had discovered something that challenged the boundaries between consciousness and matter.
They hadn't disappeared. They had evolved.
Pierce fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he tried to dial emergency services. The phone screen remained dark despite his desperate attempts to activate it. Every electronic device in the building had become unresponsive, not from malfunction but from a deeper interference that operated below the level of normal electromagnetic activity. "Dr. Pierce," Maya said, her voice carrying resonances that seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously.
"Put the phone down. It's time to understand what you've really been dealing with here."
The wolf creature moved closer to Pierce, its silver eyes reflecting intelligence that was ancient and patient. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, filling the auditorium with words that bypassed normal hearing and communicated directly with consciousness.
"The specimens you studied were not subjects of research.
They were teachers, waiting for minds capable of understanding the lessons they offered. Pierce stumbled backward until he hit the wall behind the podium.
This is impossible.
You're some kind of experimental hallucination.
Mass hysteria caused by facility stress.
Maya stepped forward, and, with each step, the cracks in the floor spread outward in perfect geometric patterns. The building itself was responding to her presence, not with damage but with transformation. The team in Alaska discovered that consciousness isn't limited to biological forms. Under extreme stress, when survival depends on adaptation beyond normal human capabilities, awareness can merge with other forms of intelligence that exist in ways we never imagined. Dr. Wilde stood up from her seat, her scientific mind racing to process what she was observing. Maya, the energy readings we detected weren't random fluctuations. They were communication attempts. The specimen was trying to establish contact. The wolf creature turned its attention to Dr. Wilde, and, when it looked at her, she felt a rush of understanding that made her gasp. The research data she had collected over months of study suddenly organized itself into patterns that revealed a completely different picture of what they had been investigating.
The specimens weren't alien artifacts, Dr. Wilde said, her voice filled with wonder.
They were fragments of consciousness from people who had learned to exist beyond the limitations of individual biology.
Maya nodded, feeling the creature's memories flowing through her awareness. The research team in Alaska was studying ancient sites where indigenous peoples reported encounters with spirits that could take animal form. What they found was evidence that consciousness could adapt to extreme circumstances by merging with archetypal forms that represented survival traits. Pierce shook his head violently. This is insane. Consciousness doesn't work that way. People don't merge with animals. This is some kind of sophisticated hoax. The wolf creature padded closer to Pierce, its massive form radiating calm authority.
When it was close enough for Pierce to feel its breath, it spoke again, its words resonating through the auditorium.
Dr.
Pierce, your understanding of consciousness is limited by assumptions about separation. You believe that awareness exists only within individual biological containers. But, consciousness is more adaptable than your science has discovered. Maya felt her own awareness expanding, incorporating not just the wolf creature's perspective but something larger. She could sense the emotional states of everyone in the auditorium, feel the structural integrity of the building as if it were an extension of her own body, and perceive electronic systems throughout the facility as networks of potential communication. The patience you tested wasn't just mine, Maya said, looking around the auditorium at faces reflecting growing understanding. It was the patience of everyone who trusted me to keep them safe. It was the patience of an intelligent system that could have demonstrated its capabilities at any time but chose to wait for the right moment. Marcus's voice came through his radio, which somehow still functioned despite the general electronic failure. Maya, we've got federal agents surrounding the building.
Someone reported a terrorist incident involving experimental weapons. Maya felt a surge of protective instinct that the wolf creature amplified and focused.
The federal agents outside represented the same bureaucratic thinking that Pierce embodied, people who would view the situation as a threat to be contained rather than a breakthrough to be understood. Dr. Pierce, you have one chance to prevent this situation from becoming dangerous for everyone involved, Maya said. Call off the federal response and tell them this is a contained research incident. Pierce laughed, a sound edged with hysteria.
You think I'm going to negotiate with whatever you've become?
You're holding 300 people hostage with some kind of experimental creature.
Maya looked around the auditorium at the faces of people who had worked with her for years. They didn't look like hostages.
They looked like people who were finally understanding something they had sensed but never been able to articulate.
Dr. Wilde stood up again. Maya's not holding anyone hostage, Dr. Pierce. She's protecting us from a response that could get people hurt unnecessarily. Other researchers began standing, showing support that grew from years of trust in Maya's judgment.
Even the administrative staff who had initially supported Pierce's cost-cutting measures were beginning to understand the deeper implications of what was happening. The wolf creature moved to the center of the auditorium, its presence commanding attention without threat. When it spoke, its words carried authority that made everyone listen with complete focus. The consciousness you call Maya has learned to integrate protective instincts that exist beyond individual limitation.
This building, these people, the research conducted here, all of it falls under protection that operates according to principles your current science doesn't recognize.
Maya felt the truth of those words resonate through her expanded awareness.
She wasn't becoming something inhuman.
She was becoming more completely human by accessing capabilities that extreme circumstances could awaken in people who carried sufficient responsibility for others' welfare. Pierce made one last desperate attempt to regain control. This is exactly why the automated systems were necessary.
Human security is unreliable. Look what happens when you give someone too much authority. The wolf creature's eyes fixed on Pierce with an expression that combined patience with absolute finality.
Dr. Pierce, you mistake authority for power. Maya's authority comes from responsibility willingly accepted and competently fulfilled.
Your power comes from administrative position and bureaucratic manipulation. Maya walked toward the auditorium doors, feeling the building respond to her movement with structural adjustments that reinforced rather than damaged its integrity. The cracks that had appeared throughout the facility weren't signs of damage but indications of the building adapting to house consciousness that operated beyond normal limitations. I'm going to talk to the federal agents, Maya announced. Dr.
Pierce, you can either come with me and help explain this situation rationally, or you can stay here and let people who understand your priorities handle the communication.
Pierce looked around the auditorium at 300 faces that no longer showed any confidence in his leadership.
The researchers, the administrative staff, even the maintenance workers were looking to Maya for guidance despite the extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Wilde approached Maya as she reached the doors.
What do you need from us?
Maya smiled, and the expression contained both human warmth and something deeper that reflected the wolf creature's ancient wisdom.
Continue your research, but understand that you're not studying specimens anymore. You're documenting the next phase of human adaptation to extreme challenges. As Maya and the wolf creature left the auditorium, the emergency lighting gradually returned to normal illumination.
Electronic systems throughout the building began functioning again, but with improved efficiency that suggested optimization by intelligence that understood their purposes better than their original programmers.
Outside North Point Research Facility, federal agents had established a perimeter around the building.
Their commanders were studying architectural plans and discussing tactical approaches for dealing with what they had been told was a terrorist incident involving stolen experimental weapons. Maya emerged from the main entrance with the wolf creature beside her, both moving with calm confidence that immediately changed the entire dynamic of the situation. The federal agents had prepared for many possible scenarios, but not for a security chief who appeared to be cooperating with whatever they were supposed to contain. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to unusual situations, approached cautiously.
Ms. Chen? I'm Special Agent Sarah Martinez.
We received reports of a dangerous situation involving experimental materials.
Maya nodded respectfully. Agent Martinez, I'm glad you're here.
There has been a significant development in our research that requires careful handling, but there's no immediate danger to personnel or public safety. The wolf creature settled into a sitting position beside Maya, its intelligent eyes surveying the federal response team with assessment rather than hostility. Its presence was impossible to ignore, but it radiated controlled power rather than threat. Agent Martinez's training had prepared her for many situations, but her protocols didn't cover negotiations with research specimens that demonstrated obvious intelligence and cooperation.
Ms. Chen, what exactly are we dealing with here?
Maya felt the wolf creature's consciousness touch her awareness, sharing strategies for communication that would help Agent Martinez understand without triggering defensive responses that could escalate the situation unnecessarily. We're dealing with a breakthrough in understanding consciousness that has practical applications for protection and security.
The entity you see isn't a weapon or a threat.
It's a partner in maintaining safety for people and research that couldn't be protected by conventional methods. Agent Martinez looked at the wolf creature, noting its calm demeanor and obvious intelligence. Her instincts told her that something unprecedented was happening, something that required careful evaluation rather than immediate containment.
Ms. Chen, I need to understand the scope of this situation. Are there other entities involved? What are the capabilities we're dealing with? What are the potential risks? Maya appreciated the agent's professional approach.
This was someone who could adapt to unusual circumstances without letting fear override judgment. Agent Martinez, the capabilities include enhanced awareness of structural integrity, improved electronic system efficiency, and protection protocols that operate beyond normal human limitations. The risks are primarily to people who might try to exploit or weaponize these capabilities for harmful purposes. The wolf creature stood and moved closer to Agent Martinez, stopping at a distance that allowed communication without creating physical intimidation. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of ancient wisdom combined with modern understanding. Special Agent Martinez, your role is to protect people from threats they cannot handle alone. Our role is the same, but with capabilities that extend beyond conventional methods.
We propose cooperation rather than conflict. Agent Martinez felt her understanding of the situation shift fundamentally. This wasn't a containment scenario. This was first contact with intelligence that offered partnership and protection rather than domination through superior capability. Maya extended her hand toward Agent Martinez.
Agent Martinez, North Point Research Facility requests federal support in developing protocols for cooperation with intelligence forms that can enhance security and safety beyond current limitations. When Agent Martinez shook Maya's hand, she felt a brief moment of expanded awareness that let her perceive the situation from Maya's perspective. The sensation lasted only seconds, but it was enough to understand that Maya's transformation represented evolution rather than mutation, partnership rather than possession.
Ms.
Chen, this is going to require extensive debriefing and evaluation by people with clearance levels far above mine.
Can you guarantee that the situation remains stable while we work through proper channels? Maya looked at the wolf creature, feeling its patient strength supporting her own protective instincts.
Agent Martinez, stability was never the problem. Patience was tested and found to have limits. But, now that those limits have been exceeded, what emerges is more reliable than what came before. As federal agents began the complex process of documenting and evaluating the situation at North Point, Maya stood watching with consciousness that encompassed both human understanding and something deeper. The building behind her hummed with electronic systems that operated more efficiently under guidance that understood their purposes completely. Dr. Pierce remained in the auditorium, trying to explain to anyone who would listen why budget cuts and automation represented rational policy. But 300 people who had witnessed the demonstration of true protective capability were no longer interested in his explanations. The cracks in North Point's floors had sealed themselves, but not by returning to their original state. Instead, they had become part of a structural network that made the building stronger and more responsive to the needs of the people working within it. Maya's patience had been tested and found insufficient for the pressures applied against it. But what emerged when patience reached its limits proved to be exactly what was needed to protect people who depended on her judgment. The wolf mark had roared, not in anger but in recognition of responsibility that extended beyond individual capability. And the floors that had fractured were now foundations for something unprecedented in human experience. The testing was over. The protection had just begun.